Hey guys, here we are again, man. All four of us are here again. Hey, Chalo, we missed you Thursday when we had Robert. You were scared, huh? That's why you didn't come.
You know
You were
what, man?
scared.
My mom called me and he says, "Hey, I didn't go over there and do all the
Limpias.
limpias and all that stuff, and she
Uh,
couldn't find the rama de guamuchil to hit me with it or something like that. So I
So
had the
did you
Palo santo.
yeah.
so did you rub yourself with the chicken there, Chalo?
Yeah, dude. Yeah, but but the bad thing about it, the only chicken I had was a Kentucky Fried Chicken, and my dogs were chasing me around for the next 4 hours.
Bucket.
Hey, you know what? It was actually, you know what it was. I mean, the guy doesn't never let you down. I mean, it was a great show. He did a great job, and a lot of questions. A lot of people engaged with us. Hopefully, we're gonna get the same today. With that said, Chalo, do you have any shout outs?
Yes, I do, man. Shout out to interim police chief of Calexico, Victor Legaspi. This is his last week. He was the interim chief. After almost 34 years of service, he says, "You know what? I am done." He saw the light. He saw how politics can be terrible in a small town, and he says, "You know what? I'm up here. I want to leave just like chiefs they're supposed to leave up here, and I'm gone." So he turned in his notice, and he went to PERS, did his paperwork. This is the last week. He's taking it easy. They're going to recognize him tomorrow at the city council meeting, and Friday at 5 p.m. is his final call up, man. Sign off.
And who's the new chief? I mean, do they
Well,
have another interim
no,
now?
man, they have an interim guy but we don't. I mean, you don't know. I mean, that it's one of those things, man. You know what? Politics is politics.
Yeah.
The PD is great. The people working there are great.
Yes.
Our city council, if you guys want to entertain yourself, go to the city of Calexico Wednesdays, every other Wednesday city council meeting. You're gonna see how crappy they are, and why people are bailing out. And unfortunately for them, they're losing good people that are retiring. That had reached retirement age but wanted to stick around. Like us, we always want to stick around an extra 2-3 years.
Yeah.
And this guy, I mean, he wanted to be chief, and it looks like he might have gotten it, and now suddenly he says, you know what, I'm not gonna be doing their shenanigans, and I'm gone. He's a good guy, dude. He's leaving on a high note. Hats off to Victor
Good.
Legaspi.
Yeah.
It takes a lot, man, to realize that it's not, if it's not there for you, man, and you don't want to go down in history as being a chief that did things that were not supposed, that were kind of, it, it wasn't coming out of him. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I mean, so
Yeah.
I'm glad he said, you know what, I'm not going to take this. His integrity means a lot, and he says, I'm done.
Well,
I'm
good,
done.
man. Thank you, Chief, for your service. Benny, do we have anything? Any
No,
shout
I would
outs?
just go with Chalo. I met him and I sat with him during Chalo's retirement, and he was a really good guy, man. I met him and his wife, and outstanding people, man. Just definitely a good guy. Another shout outs to my son, Nico. He's turned 33
Happy
years old today.
birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday,
Wow.
Nico.
Yeah, in his prime of his life, man. Happy birthday to my son, man.
Do you guys remember what you guys doing at age of 33? I
can't
don't.
talk
I
about
was
it.
working.
I don't.
I think I was along the border somewhere.
No, it
Yeah.
took all three of us long enough to even know what you asked.
Yeah, what was I doing?
Hey, the sad thing about it, you guys are gonna go to sleep tonight thinking, "Damn, he planted a question in my mind, and now I'm gonna keep on going back to that."
It wasn't in writing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Big Sean, any shout outs?
Yeah, with everything that's going on around the world, for all our first responders throughout the country and stuff, you know what? Just situational awareness is going to be really high right now, and even for our listeners who aren't in law enforcement, if you see something, say something, because I'm here to tell you what I'm hearing from sources that I have throughout the spec ops community, as it were. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of time, when and where. So
Sean, and just the fact that we've had open borders for the last 3 years, 2.5 years, it just doesn't help, right?
Yeah. I saw a thing on the news today in Georgia and in the South, South Carolina. They're getting a lot of MS-13 guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're going everywhere. Hey, guys, but listen, today we're going to have an MS-13 expert, and Benny, it is all yours. We're excited about this outstanding guest that we have, Dave Buchanan. It's all yours.
Yeah, well, when I worked the jail, we didn't have any MS-13s that I'm aware of, but maybe Dave can encounter some. Today's guest is a 33-year-old veteran from the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. He's retired Sheriff's Deputy Dave Buchanan. He's going to join us tonight, and we're going to talk about San Diego's most dangerous and violent men that we had in our custody. Dave supervised high-profile inmates such as Sagan Penn, Joselito Cinco, Jonathan George, David Lucas, David Westerfield, the Claremont Killer, Hector and Ronnie Ayala, Henry Hubbard. Remember that guy? Henry Hubbard,
Yeah.
Bad Marquez, Craig Pyre, and members of the Sindo Mob, Crips, Bloods, Pyrus, just to name a few. Dave patrolled at the Santee Sheriff Station in his early 90s. Dave's area of expertise is in the operation of the department's 7 jails. I believe that we all have 8 jails now, I believe. Anyway, David, welcome to the show and thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, Dave.
Dave, I'm going to ask you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Growing up, did you always want to be a police officer? When did you become a deputy sheriff? What academy did you go to? How hard was the academy? And what were some of your assignments after the academy?
To start, I was still in high school. My uncle, Deputy Lanny Jaco, he happened to be a police officer with National City PD. He got me into the Explorer program there. And this was in the early 70s. And long story short, I loved it. I ended up going into the military right after I graduated from high school, went into security police. I came out, got some small-time jobs. Then I put myself through the Southwestern College First Academy as an open enrollee because at the time they weren't hiring too many of this. So I put myself through the academy, graduated, and 2 months after graduation, I got hired by the Sheriff's Department. Started my career at the old Central Jail for a few years. Loved it, learned a ton, and just a life that I had never experienced before, much of anyway. And so I did about 3 to 4 years there, went to Santee Patrol, loved it out there just as well. Just as much. About a year or so later, I transferred back to the jail and continued my career in the jails and eventually moved to Las Colinas Women's Jail for a little while. Then after that, I went to the George Bailey Jail. I did about 8 years there, went to the East Mesa Jail, which is almost like a camp type setting. And after that, I went back to George Bailey. I did a short time at South Bay Jail, and I did a TAD at the Sheriff's Crime Lab for about a year and learned a lot there, saw a lot of stuff. And I retired out of the George Bailey Jail in 2019 after 33 years.
Wow. A real quick, since I was an explorer myself as I started my police career, did you ever? Now you look back at your career and you look at, and here I go going back again. Having you guys go back years. Did your being an explorer and how you ended your career? Did it go the way you thought it was going to go?
Yes and no. Yes, it was. I got a taste of the life on the streets. As an explorer, you don't get to see a lot, but at National City, they take you to a lot anyway. And I learned a lot from the National City police officers, and quite a bit, quite an eye opener there. And I had planned on staying in patrol a lot longer than I did, and maybe move on to other specialized units. That didn't happen. Long story, but it didn't happen. I decided to go back to the jails and continue my career in the jails. But even with that, I still enjoyed it. I had a lot of experiences in the jails. I was a training officer, a corporal. I did a lot of training, trained a lot of deputies. And I learned things from newer deputies who had new, fresh ideas too. So that's something for a lot of deputies to keep be aware of. Newer deputies can teach you new things, new ideas.
Yeah, one of the things and I admire is the people that work the jail. As I came up my career, I depended a lot on them for a lot of intel and info. And I had friends that were deputies that were working at the time. You had to do jail time before you went on the streets,
Yeah.
and so I was able to get a lot of stuff that I wanted from them. So hats off to anybody that works in corrections, and especially, I mean, deputies that work the jail. They don't, you don't, as a street cop, you don't know what good it is for you to actually do some time in the jail before you hit the streets.
Yeah, working in the jail is not glamorous. You don't go there to be glamorous or to get fame or anything. There's very little recognition, but you deal with people at their worst, right off the street, that have been in jail for years and years, con artists, people that want to hurt you and so forth. But it's not really open to the public. Very few people see what actually goes on. So it's not there for the excitement, the glamour that you see on TV. But it is something that is it's a worthwhile career. And I enjoyed it. I'm glad that I did what I did.
All right, Dave. So this one segues into the next question. Benny, are you through with yours? Yeah, you are, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So Dave, tell us about working at San Diego jail, and which jail is the busiest that you remember, and how is it to work in such a violent and unpredictable environment when you're working at jail?
Well, my time at the old Central Detention Facility, CDF, we also called it the pit, because we put a lot of people in the pit, which is called the safety cell. I believed that was one of the busiest jail, that and also Vista, because Vista was also an intake jail. The other jails at the time, George Valley didn't exist, East Mesa didn't exist. So it was Descanso, it was South Bay, Las Colinas, Vista, and CDF. It was, I can only go by my own opinion, is that we were very busy because we accepted a lot of inmates from a lot of different areas and so forth. So the other jails, many of them were just for housing purposes, and then transporting them to like prison or courts or whatever like that. But they just didn't accept them right off the streets. What was the other part of your question?
Just, I mean, so is how violent, which we asked you which was the busiest, and you answered it. And how is it to work in such a violent and unpredictable environment?
That's interesting because the inmates that have been there, the higher profile inmates, they weren't necessarily as violent, although they had the potential of being violent because we knew who they were and what their charges were. So we used extra precaution around them. But most of the violence or the fighting or where we went hands-on was in the intake area from new arrestees that are right off the street, because they're still either drunk, high on drugs, they're still mad at the world, they want to hurt somebody or whatever the case may be. And we take them at the gate and they don't want to be there. They want to argue with us and so forth. And a lot of them just don't understand the situation that they're in. And we have to deal with that. So a lot of the violence usually took place when inmates were brought in for the first time. Then they are dealing with other new arrestees and they're arguing with each other. They tend to fight with each other. And the first floor at the old Central Jail was probably very busy. We handled drunk drivers and everything like that. In the housing areas, the high profile inmates were tried to stay under the radar for the most part because they didn't want to attract negative attention from the deputies, because then they work the deputy for favors and so forth, like to get them things. It's the unknown inmate that needs to make a name for themselves that you tend to have more problems with.
Wow.
Hey, Dave, are deputy assaults and the use of force incidents common? And tell us how the jail is dealing with inmates who were sentenced to state prison, but instead of going there, they end up serving their sentence in a county jail.
Starting with that part first, that's AB 109. That was a law that where inmates, the initial plan was inmates that were either nonviolent, low level, low threat, so forth, would stay in county custody during and serve out their sentence. I believe it was for up to 5 years. Those criteria did not last long, and they started housing more and more of the higher level inmates in county custody. The story behind that was to help reduce prison population, which in the long run it probably did, but it increased the population in the county jails. And we weren't built for that. So they went to triple bunking, but they didn't increase the size of anything. So we had to end up putting higher level inmates into lower level housing areas, which turned into a huge headache. And we had a lot more problems with that. As far as assaults, that's just a daily occurrence. You hope for the best. You hope to catch what you can, inmate on inmate. Most of it is, it's not real serious, for the lack of a better term. It's still a crime, and we investigate it like any other crimes. Assaults on deputies they don't occur as often, but they do occur. When I was at George Bailey, it was probably maybe once or twice a week. We would have a cover call at various houses. And usually it went from a light hands-on to a takedown type technique. And the one good thing about working in the jail system is your cover deputies are within just a few minutes at the most. So your cover is there, and you can take care of business with using the least amount of force as necessary.
Yeah, not like we're working Alpine and your closest is in Lakeside Santee.
Right. So, I mean, we had the equipment to use, and everybody carried their own stuff, but we didn't carry the nightsticks while we're doing our 1153s, walking around doing our checks. We did have our pepper spray, or OC, handcuffs, and that kind of stuff. Keys can be used as weapons, whatever. But hands-on techniques were our primary use unless it really went sideways, then you had to use something else. But that was one of the benefits of working in the jail system, is that your cover deputies were only seconds or less than a minute away.
Hey, Dave, you brought up something that I've always said, and I like to, when it comes up, I like to tell the audiences that AB 109 really did a real bad number on us, didn't it, to all law enforcement and to the citizens of California, because it tied our hands in a way. It's a beginning of the end to the way the criminal justice system was doing, and so it tied our hands. Gave these guys, made it easier for them. Nobody went to prison. They went to county jail, and then the county jail started getting filled up with a lot of people, and then people are not going to jail now. I mean, simple as that. So I'm a conspiracy theorist, and I always said that it was something that a political party did to get control of their party, to control California for decades, for a century. That's the way I look at it.
In addition to the 109, AB 109, they also started reducing felonies to misdemeanors. Felony drug possessions were reduced to misdemeanor drug possessions, and then some misdemeanors and infractions were either made no longer illegal. So instead of putting the criminal in jail and keeping them in custody, it released more people into the streets, thus crime continued.
So, I mean, just the fact that carrying a loaded firearm is a misdemeanor now. I mean, it used to be a felony. I mean, you went to prison for that.
It used to be an enhancement. They took away the enhancement in California. So, I mean, they're so anti-gun. Why would they take it away? I don't know. I can't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can do another 3 hours on just that alone. Oh, am I next, Sean?
Yeah.
Okay, Dave. Our podcast today is about high-profile inmates.
Yes.
Please tell us some of the most violent and notorious inmates you ever supervised while working in San Diego.
Sure. I wrote down some of the higher profile inmates that we dealt with. Keeping in mind that there were a lot of them. there are just so many of them. I had to try to narrow down to things that might ring a bell, such as like when Sheriff's Deputy Kellyanne Baser was murdered. The inmates were Prentice Bird, Jesse Lee Stewart, and Ronnie Davis Williams. I dealt with those guys. They were punks. They're gang members, punks. Try to make a name for themselves, but they were convicted and sent to prison. You mentioned Joselito Cinco earlier. He killed Kimberly Tannehill and Officer Timothy Roop, and he also wounded Officer Gary Mitrovich, San Diego Police Department. I think we're all aware of his situation. He was convicted of murder. I remember when they were searching for him in the Balboa Park area, and they caught him I believe the next morning. My personal experiences with him is he was just an idiot. He was stupid. He tried to be a big shot. He was in high level custody, maximum custody, and he was one of the first, not necessarily the first, but one of my first crime reports where I watched him, not intentionally, it was an accident, but he ended up getting beaten up by another inmate. That inmate's name was Myers. And so that was one of my first big reports. He was sent to the hospital via Astria because of the high profile. We all know about Sagan Penn. He killed San Diego police officer Thomas Riggs and wounded Officer Donovan Jacobs. I also shot what was her name? The ride-along, Sarah Louise.
Ruiz Pena.
There you go. Interesting, and a case that made a lot of deputies and law enforcement angry when he was acquitted. There's a lot to his story. He was pretty much polite to the deputies while in custody. Didn't cause us too much trouble. He was low-spoken, soft-spoken, at least when we were around. He was acquitted, got into more trouble eventually, domestic violence type issues. He came back into the jail several more times. And then, as we all know, I believe he died by suicide overdose. We all know about the Sindo Mob. They included Stacy Butler, Daryl Bradshaw, Kevin Standard, Clifton Cunningham, Kyle Winters, and Edric Jordan. And they shot and killed Officer Jerry Hartless. They were first originally charged with. They were first originally convicted of murder, but there was a lot going on with the investigation, and I'm sure you guys know.
Yeah.
There was a lot of bad stuff. They had a star witness who was named Darren Palmer. He was allowed to go into the DA's office with his visitor and do their thing. They found a camera in his office, and they took photos of themselves doing things and so forth. Anyway, long story short, because of that, because of some poor investigations and so forth, they resentenced him to manslaughter, I believe it was. And they were eventually released from custody, so they pretty much got away with killing a police officer. I haven't heard anything. I'm sorry?
Hey, Dave, wasn't Sindo Mob providing security for some of the other inmates that had violent crimes? Or
they claimed to have taken Dale Aiki under their wing.
Now, who was Dale?
Dale Aiki?
Yes.
He was arrested for allegedly molesting children at a church daycare in the late 80s, I believe it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or maybe I think it was the late 80s.
The early 90s, around there.
The DA at the time was Edwin
Miller.
Miller, there you go.
Yeah.
Whether he's guilty or not, to this day, I'm not sure. But he was acquitted, won a huge lawsuit, and things were changed after that. He was very quiet, very polite. a very odd individual. But if he was guilty, he got away with it. If he was innocent, it happened. Let's see. The Sindel mob, I pretty much covered that. They got away with it for the most part. One note on the Sindel mob when I was working at George Bailey is Stacy Butler's son, Stacy Butler Jr., became in custody. He wasn't quite as bad as his father, but he was there. Another infamous inmate was CHP officer Craig Pyer. We all know about him. He strangled and murdered student Kara Knott during a traffic stop. He strangled her and threw her over an overpass on the I-15 at Mercy Road. He was mostly quiet with deputies. He probably felt like he was still a cop, but in custody. I can't answer for any other deputies there, but for the most part, I believe we all treated him as like an inmate. There was no professional courtesy there. He didn't talk too much, and I think he got 25 to life. Let's see, there was Officer Henry Hubert that was mentioned earlier. Numerous attacks on couples and rapes on the beaches. And his downfall was during one of his rapes, he left his police-issued flashlight on the scene, and that's how they identified him. I think he just got several years. I don't recall how many. One inmate that I had actually worked with was a former deputy, Valentino Watson, Val Watson. He was convicted of murdering his wife with a baseball bat to the head in front of his son. He got life in prison, but he eventually died in prison from diabetes.
His wife was a dispatcher.
I was told, well, she worked at Las Colinas jail as a clerk for a period of time. Yeah. And they erected a fountain in her honor. So she may have been a dispatcher also. I don't know. There was one unknown, pretty much unknown, but he was well known at the time, a guy named Tufik Nadi. He was convicted of killing several members of his family. Mm-hmm. Very polite with deputies. He was very polite, but he was, at the time, I was early in my career, and they didn't have too many inmates that were assigned as what's called chains and rovers, where anywhere that they went, they were escorted with two deputies and in chains around the waist and on the legs. He was not considered high risk, but he was chained because he attacked his attorney in court one day.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah. We all know Jonathan George, 1992, escaped from a sheriff's van in the Gaslamp Quarter, was pursued by a lone female deputy driver, Deputy Lydia Warner, age 58 at the time. I'll say she was pretty brave because she chased him, jumped on this guy's back, and Jonathan George, if we all remember, he was a very large man.
Yeah, he's huge.
Huge man. He was about 6 foot, 6'1", but extremely muscular. Unfortunately, he knocked her back down to the sidewalk, took her gun, pointed her gun at her, but did not shoot. Thank God. Took her Smith & Wesson Model 66. Then he hijacked a gentleman named Mick Champion in the Gaslamp Quarter and hijacked him. I don't know if he resisted or not, but he shot Mr. Champion and killed him. He was eventually caught because I think he may have gone home or just a location where they knew, arrested him soon after. And he went to death row. We all know about Bernard Hamilton, 1979. He was convicted of 187 murder on a student named Eleanor Buchanan. He kidnapped her at the Mesa College parking lot after her class, kidnapped her in her van, I believe, raped, assaulted her, he killed her, he ended up chopping her head and her hands off, and I'm not sure if her feet, but to try to prevent identification, didn't work. Long story short, he was convicted, sentenced to death. At the time, Supreme Court Justice Rose Byrd was in office. She overturned his death penalty. So he was returned to San Diego for a new death hearing. He, if I gave him any credit at all, he made a mockery of our justice system. The only thing that I could do is say is that they granted his every wish. They made him a pro per, which means that he acted as his own attorney. He was given a laptop, a cell phone. He was given 2 cells. He was given all the legal runners that he needed, all the legal assistance that he needed. He had a file with that locked that only he had the combination to. Deputies weren't allowed access to it. He was granted 2 cells because he claimed that he had a talent of painting, and he wanted to show the world that his life was worth saving because he had talent. So he was allowed to paint while in the cell. And this is in the maximum custody cell tank that he was in, along with Joselito Cinco and some other high profiles. Anyway, he was a pro per, and he made a mockery. He lost, and he was also reconvicted, sentenced to death. And he later died in prison from health reasons. I'm not sure what. We all know about the Ayala brothers and their uncle Joe Marino, and also Richard Buchanan, who was also part of their mafia team.
Is that Richie Buchanan?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, good.
He was also there. Their uncle Joe Marino was acquitted, I believe. But the other 3 were convicted of the homicide. They did it was a drug deal gone bad at a garage, and they committed murder. They were part of the Mexican mafia. Most of the time, those guys were all polite with deputies. Not too much trouble because they ran things like you wouldn't believe. They were polite, professionally courteous, rarely talked back to deputies. But because they were able to pass information to other inmates and to their own kind, they were put in administrative segregation, which was their own cell. And we assigned a deputy to sit outside their cell. You may remember, I think it was fourth or fifth cell floor, right next to the deputy station. There were some ADSEG cells. That's where they were. They were convicted. You may remember David Lucas.
Mm-hmm.
He was a carpet cleaner and was convicted of several rapes and and the murder of a small child. He was also sentenced to death. I talked about Charles Tyberg earlier, and there's a couple of inmates that were not well known, but they were very problem children with us. Richard Mays might ring a bell, and Chris Spells.
Christopher Bell.
Yeah.
Richard Mays and Chris Bell. Yeah, Christopher.
Yeah. We went after him twice.
He,
Weren't they Crips? I think they were Crips. West Coast.
yes, I believe
West
so.
Coast Crips, yeah.
Chris Bells was convicted of a number of robberies. One funny thing is, while he was sent off to prison, I heard a rumor that he had been killed in prison, and about several months later, he was back in our jail. So that's rumors. Richard Mays, he had a talent of smuggling in contraband from court. Would bring in like matches and so forth, and he was known to make weapons such as billy clubs out of toilet paper and newspaper. One time he collected a whole bunch of match heads, stuffed them into a toilet paper roll, made a wick, and they turned it into a little bomb.
Yeah.
And it made a loud boom, and the fire department responded. So that was his talent. There were a number of others. you remember the Claremont killer,
Cleopas?
Cleopa Prince?
Cleopa Prince.
Yeah.
He interesting story on him was he was initially he was released from custody due to lack of evidence. They had plenty, but lack of evidence for some reason. And then this was prior to DNA being perfected. So the day that he was released, I was working his floor, and I got the little release slip in the tube system. We had a tube system for communication and so forth. And it was for Cleopa Prince. I was a little surprised by this. I called to verify it. It was verified. So I escorted them to what we call the down well for inmates to go down for processing. And I commented, well, if you come back, I'm going to beat you up or something like that. And he laughed. He was big, smiling. And it didn't take long, but he was back in custody, better evidence from DNA evidence, and convicted. And I'm not sure of what the penalty that he got. So
the thing about Cleopas, there, even though it was before DNA, there was a lot of DNA, or a lot of evidence on him, and he was kind of a tough guy, not a tough guy, but a muscular guy too.
Yeah. He was not big, but he was in good condition. Good,
strong.
Yeah, he was classified as a serial killer.
Yeah. So those were some of the ones that I came up with that I had written down. There were several others that weren't as well known, but with most of these guys that are well known, they didn't cause a lot of trouble with the deputies.
Hey, David, did you ever deal with David Westerfield?
I never dealt with him, no. He was at the new San Diego jail downtown. I worked the old one, and his case happened while I was assigned to the George Bailey jail. So I never dealt with him.
Hey, Hector, Carlos Chacon was telling me one time that even though Ronnie and Hector had a deputy assigned to them to basically sit there and stare at them, they were still able to communicate and do transactions and do shit.
Yeah, that's because they still had all their rights, their Title 15 rights, showering, phone calls, whatever, and you couldn't prevent everything. But the only thing that really did was it didn't let him communicate by the floor trustee. That position didn't last very long, but it did happen. But they were still able to communicate, and they were good at what they did. Give them credit for that. They were good at communicating and giving orders and stuff like that. Yeah. I'm not sure if I covered everything for those guys. Oh, like I was saying, they weren't very argumentative. Jonathan George did mouth off a lot of times to certain deputies, but he never got physically violent, just more of the argumentative type.
Yeah, Stacy Butler had a motor mouth too.
Yeah, but I can only comment on how he acted while I was there, and he tried to be funny a lot, but he was a little cocky. Actually, all those Sindo mob guys were a little cocky.
Go.
Yeah.
Hey, was Erskine there when you were in county jail? County jail?
That was where he killed the two boys.
Those little boys down in South Bay. Yeah.
The bicycle. That was Harris that ate the burgers.
Yeah, that was Harris. Yeah.
No, I didn't deal with either of those two.
Oh, okay.
All right. Check it out, Dave. So has the San Diego County Jail ever experienced a deputy hostage incident? And if they did, can you tell us a little bit about it? And whatever you can tell us about it too.
Yes. I am personally aware of two. The first one was at the old Central Jail. My partner and good friend, Jose Gonzalez, he had taken some inmates up to the roof, which was the 8th floor, not the actual roof, but it was called the roof. It was fenced off area for their exercise and haircuts and stuff. But long story short, It was a small group of inmates who, and they were mixed races, so they weren't part of a certain gang, but they conspired to work together. And their initial target was a different deputy, a black deputy. And they changed their mind on him because of his race, and they chose Jose. And Jose went up there, and it's hard to describe, but when they're doing haircuts, when they're done, we open up a gate and we switch the inmates for the next haircut guy. Well, at that time, they jumped him. They had a sharpened metal ladle for soup, and they put that to his throat, wrapped him up in basically a bear hug. They took his keys, his watch, his wallet, and his radio, I believe. I don't know what the conversation was. You can probably figure it out, standard stuff. They took him over what was called the Northwest Smoke Chase, which is a stairwell that led to the northwest part of the jail. And what they had believed was that his keys would allow them to get out and out through the doors at the bottom. Now there are 8 floors up, and I believe they had a escape vehicle waiting for them on the outside. Well, when they got to the bottom of the floor, there's 2 doors that are locked, and both doors open from the outsides, not on the insides. Once they got through the first door and tried to open up the second door, there was no keyhole for that. And the guys on the outside obviously don't have keys, so they were stuck. So Jose was being calm as best as he could. He talked them into going back upstairs. He said that he wouldn't report it, and whatever else he told them. So they took him back upstairs, gave him back the stuff. The control deputy, I think he said something on the radio, but he wasn't sure what. The control deputy either asked him to repeat, asked him if he was code 4, if he was okay. Strange sound, so they sent up some deputies for cover, discovered what was happening, and took care of business. Seriously, they caught all of them, and they just handled business very well. So he was the first one I knew about. He survived, thank God. He was not injured as far as I know. The other one was a civilian nurse, and I think it was at the South Bay where a unknown inmate took her hostage with a small pencil to her throat. They were in a medical exam room, and this went on for a number of hours. Our deputies tried to communicate. It wasn't working, and long story short, they ended up going in and tackling the guy and taking him into custody. And thank God she wasn't hurt either. Those are the only 2 that I was aware of.
Wow.
Hey, Dave, how many jail riots have you experienced? And on a second set of questions, how do you handle crimes that are committed in the jail, inmate on inmate and that such? And is there an investigative unit that especially does the investigations, or do the deputies that are working on watch do it?
How many? Numerous. I could not even begin to count how many riots I've seen and dealt with. They're spur of the moment type things. Sometimes we get wind of them and we can predict them, and then we can prevent them by locking everybody down for a period of time. But the ones that we miss, they happen, and the deputies just respond to it, call for cover, explain what's happening. So as far as the other jails, I'm not really sure how often. They probably don't happen as often as the intake jails or at George Bailey, but there was enough to tire you out and so forth. You get tired of that stuff, but you handle business always. We had what was called a TAC team on all the teams. They were assigned deputies who were specifically assigned for that task. And each of those deputies had a responsibility as far as what less lethal weapons that they carried, or were they arrest, anything like that. So they handled their business separately from the floor deputies. A lot of them were handled within minutes. Some of them it took a while to solve. And that along with other crimes that happened in the jail, whatever they happen to be, we had a special unit called DIU, which is Detentions Investigation Unit. That was staged.
Sorry.
But they did the after the follow-ups investigation for those type of things, so they weren't necessarily involved in the actual action. But and then if there was ever any serious incidents, like maybe inmates had a deadly weapon, or maybe a hostage or something to that effect, there was life-threatening situation, then we could call in SED and they would come in with the more lethal weapons and handle business. I did not see that happen. I saw that maybe twice in my career where SED had to come in.
Hey, David, can you tell our audience what SED is?
Special Enforcement Detail. It's like a SWAT team. It is a SWAT team, but for the Sheriff's Department, it's SED.
Thanks.
A great bunch of guys too.
Yes. Highly trained and very motivated, and they handle their business very well. I'm not sure if I covered the whole question on there.
Yeah, you did. Sean?
No, it's Chalo's turn.
Number 9.
No, number 8. Because I just
You know what?
riots.
I think Chalo right now he's having some problems with his internet.
Okay, I'll go with number 8 then. Or number 9.
I'm good, bro. I'm good. I'm
You're
good.
good?
He already answered number 8.
Yeah, he did answer the. Yeah, he did answer the
okay.
SED guy.
All right, then what type of weapons are discovered by deputies in the jail? In your opinion, what makes the best weapons in jail? White inmates are known to make the best jail-made weapons in prison?
Well, as far as who makes the best weapons, I can't really pin that on any specific group. In my experience, anyway, it could be gang members, it could be experienced inmates. I can't give an accurate answer for that. The types of weapons, we had various displays of the types of weapons that have been found over the years. A lot of them are metal, a lot of them are not metal. They're made of paper or plastic. Some have razor blades in them. The best type of weapon, in my opinion, is the one that is easily concealed. It doesn't have to be big and scary looking. As long as it's concealed and the deputies don't find it, that is an effective weapon. If the deputies find it, it's useless to them. So unless the deputy is just what we call HUA and doesn't do a good pat down, doesn't find it, or never searches the cell. But if it can't be hidden or concealed, it is probably not good, and you're just gonna.
Excuse me, Dave. For the listeners that don't know what HUA mean, can you please tell us what it means?
I've probably been there a few times myself. Head up your ass.
Head up your ass. Thank you. Thank you. There are a lot of people that we do the cop talk here, and later on they start texting us like, "Hey, what does that mean?" So head up ass. HUA.
I admit I've experienced it myself. Basically, I call it a brain fart, where
there you go.
Miss something, and as long as you keep looking. But any weapon that is easily found is going to be useless to the inmate. So they tend to find make the smaller ones, plastic, where they can melt. They can use electrical cords or an electrical outlet to get heat, or the hot water heater thing in there. Melted into the short toothbrush. They can put soap, bars, socks, make like a mace. Some of them that have the locks, they'll put locks in there. Paper, they'll make paper mache type things out of newspaper and let it harden for clubs, billy clubs. You name it, they could probably make a weapon out of it. The only thing is they have to find the material to use, and they have to be able to conceal it. So the metal items, we give them razors every day, and if the deputy is not watching and they turn it back in, which they're supposed to, they should not be able to turn in a razor that is missing its blade holder that is missing its blade. So they can be pretty ingenious as far as what they can make. So in my time, I pulled knives off of inmates right off the street. I pulled drugs off them, and at one time we found a Model 60 Smith & Wesson 38 in the phone tank, and that's after I did like 8 or 10 searches out of the phone tank, and whoever had it got scared and tried to ditch it, probably under the toilet or something, until somebody found it. So.
You know, Dave, the shanks are made different. You know, they got different types of shanks. It depends who you're going to hit. I mean, what's your target? Is it just a beating that we're going to give somebody, a warning, or is it just what's known as a shakeada? Now, if somebody's got to get hit, they're going to use some good bone crushers, and they're going to come after you pretty good.
Yeah, I've found a few clubs made out of newspaper that are just wet and then they're hardened. And newspapers don't attract a lot of attention until you start making something out of them. They can also roll them up and make like dart guns or even spears out of them. One weapon that is very common is not a physical weapon, but we call it gassing. And many deputies have been gassed, and that's where the inmates will save up their feces or their urine in a cup or a food tray and have it in their cell near their cell door to throw at a deputy. So that's not necessarily a sharp instrument, but it is gassing causes infection, sickness. It's a health hazard. So,
you know, Dave, when I worked in the jail in the late 70s and 80s, spears were very popular within the black inmate population, mainly the Crips. I mean, we came across a lot of spears. Yeah. Another weapon of choice by Sureños or your Hispanic gang members was a sock mace, which consisted of a sock with 1 or 2 bars of soap. They soak it in water and it gets hard. And then we use those as a mace for striking. I mean, knock you out pretty good. Are those weapons, are they still popular when you left, those 2 weapons?
Yeah, we would find the sock maces. We wouldn't actually find them a lot. I don't think I ever found any that were hardened by soaking them in water and letting them harden. I don't think I ever found those, but it's easy to miss because it only takes a couple of seconds to stuff a sock with something. So those were readily handy, and only some jails had the loose locks, the padlocks that they could put in there. East Mesa had them for a while. I don't know if they still do or not. But something else that the rolled up newspapers would do is, yes, they would make spears out of them, but they were also used for drop lines at the old jail, because the old jail, CDF, had the, what do you call them, the louvered windows, and most of them were either broken or missing. So they would have a long string made out of sheet or a blanket, and they would run the string out the window to get their contraband. And the problem with that is most of the contraband was drugs, stuff like that, or they could also sneak in a weapon that way. So that was a serious thing, drop lines. And
so Dave, can you explain more about that? Like, how does it work? I mean, was it tossed onto the street where people from the outside would put the drugs or the weapons?
Yes. They would have a set time, whatever time that they did it based on their phone call with the person on the outside. And they would, it was a hit and miss type thing. They would have a roll up newspaper and they would extend it to where it's several feet in length, up to maybe 6 feet, 7, 8 feet in length. And it would be very time consuming, but they would have to do it fast because we did our floor checks. So they would just send the string down the middle of the rolled up newspaper and out the window, and it would have to be a long string based on which floor that they were on. And then once the person on the outside found the string, they would tie the evidence or the contraband to that, and then they would pull it back up. And in my time at CDF, I found a bunch of those. Sometimes you walk right into them. You don't see the string, and you walk right into it, and you just grab a hold of it, you pull it up, hoping something's on the end, you catch it. Or a few times when I was doing like a perimeter check, I would see the drop lines coming down towards me. Yeah. And because I'm there, the person on the outside is not going to approach the string. So I would just grab a hold of it, then I would radio the floor where it's coming out, and hopefully the deputy would catch the other person the inmate on the other end. So that was very happened quite often at the old jail. And it was only because they had open access to the outside.
Chalo.
There you go, Matt. Man, that's. Hey, Dave, tell us about the scariest and most dangerous incident you were involved in while working in the jail.
I tried hard to think of something, the most scariest one, and it's really hard to narrow that down because riots are riots. You have your protection. Probably the scariest time was when I'm dealing with an inmate on my own by myself, and he's unpredictable, and then he turns on me, and then it's him and me for a little bit until I can call for cover, and if I can get to my radio and so forth. Scariest times is when one of my partners gets injured. That is a hard thing to take without wanting to take action yourself. Thank God I didn't see too many partners get injured, but some did get injured either through physical fighting or whatever. I tried hard to think of something, and the only thing from the old, well, we've had several riots at the old jail. One time in particular, we had a riot, and the inmates in the cell, it was either, I think it was on the 4th floor, but I'm not positive, where they claimed to have killed inmate. We ended up calling in SED. They responded with lethal force, and long story short, they were not telling the truth, but we handled the situation. There was no inmate injured on that. I wish I could think of a specific incident that was very scary. I'm just drawing a blank on anything that really just stands out. I don't like my partners getting injured. And it's the one-on-one situation where your nearest backup is not near you, although they're only maybe a minute or two away. So I'm not really sure how to answer that one.
Hey, Dave.
You know what, Dave? I think what happened is this: if we would have asked you this question 15 years into your career, you would have had a bunch of scary stories and stuff like that.
Yeah, probably because I was a young rookie at the time, early on in my career, and it was quite an eye opener. But not to brag or anything, but I really surprised myself at times where, I did things that I didn't think that I could do. And I just spread my wings and thank God got the inmate to back off or back down or whatever. But I was able to handle business, and I surprised myself at times.
Hey, Dave, did you ever worried that the panic button wasn't going to work? David, I think there's a photo of the panic button we used to use in the jail where you pull the pin. Many times that panic button wasn't working.
No, these are the deputy's alarms, and how it works is we had it clipped to our belt or wherever you wanted to carry it, and you just pull the pin, and you hoped that this thing set off the sensor like a fire alarm sensor. It was just a light, and you hope that it set it off, and if it didn't set off the light, we would toss it down the hallway and hope that it triggers one of them because they were about every 10 feet. After you did that, you hoped that the control deputy was monitoring the deputy alarm board because it lights up like a tank alarm and it makes a beeping sound. The deputy would go over to it and say, deputy's alarm, 4th, 3rd, 5th floor, whatever, and deputies would respond to it just like a call for cover. So these, they didn't work more than they worked. And if they didn't work, you hope to have a radio. Well, when we had these, we didn't have radios. So that's why we use these. The worst time in my career that I could remember these not working, what I had to do was I was fighting with an inmate with a couple of nurses in the medical area at Central Jail. We were fighting with them, struggling, so I pulled my deputy's alarm, I tossed it into the hallway, nothing. So my only choice was to let it go because the inmate was having a modified seizure, and he was resisting a lot. The nurses and the doctor were able to hold him down while I jumped up and I got onto what they call the intercom box, and I called central control and I said, cover now in medical. And the deputy said, 10-9, repeat. I said, cover now in medical. And then I got the cavalry coming up. But that's the one specific time where it did not work like it should have. But I had to use other resources to get cover to me. Other times, by the time I pulled the deputy's alarm, a lot of times I would have the inmates in the tanks press their panic alarms. You know, if I couldn't call for help myself, I would yell at them and say, press your alarm now. So it would take a little bit longer because deputies don't always respond to tank alarms as fast, but it still got cover there. So, and then back in the early days, we didn't have radios, so we had to use the telephone. There was one telephone on both catwalks on each side of the jail, and you would have to call them by pressing the buttons on the telephone number. So these, I mean, they are what they are. They got better over time, but deputies stopped carrying them because your radio doesn't always work, and these were a last resort, but they weren't carried very often. Not as reliable as they should be.
Wow.
Hey, Dave, when I came on the department or went through the regional academy, we had sheriffs in there and they all rotated into, when we graduated from the academy. And so that some of them went out in the street, but most of them went and did their jail, trained in the jail, and then they rotated in the street. And now they have a corrections academy that's specifically for jail deputies. Can you tell us about their training and how much training they get?
I never went through the correctional academy. I went to the regular LE academy, but I went to Southwestern College, it was open enrollee. So I went through the full academy on my own. But nowadays, the correctional program, which was initially, they were called correctional deputies, they started in 1988. I started in 1985. And their academy was a little bit shorter. They didn't have to go through the patrol training and so forth. But now everybody pretty much gets, mostly once they're on the job, they get, I believe it's 24 hours a year in various types of training. And the types of training can be almost anything, anything related to what's going on. But it changes a lot. It changes based on current events, that type of things. But training is very good. Deputies are trained very well, very reliable, but it also depends on the deputy themselves. Not everybody is cut out to be a deputy sheriff or a police officer. It's the personality. Or deputy to perform this job, but you have to have your wits about yourself. We're not going to always listen to you. Inmates are going to call your bluff. They're going to tell you no a lot. They claim that they know their rights, and inmates are given a lot more rights or not necessarily rights, but privileges. And they know how social media works and so forth, how activism works. So they can threaten the deputy and claim to file complaints, lawsuits, and all that. So the deputy's hands are tied a lot. Mm-hmm. So their training is good. It all depends on how the deputy handles their training or expresses their training. And like I said, it's not meant for everybody. But on that topic, I wanted to give a shout out to our new sheriff, Kelly Martinez. She's doing a fantastic job for us. She's implementing new policies, new programs for deputies and the inmates and out on the streets and everything. And she's under a lot of pressure from activists, from people on the outside, lawsuits and everything. Unfortunately, we're getting a lot of inmate deaths in custody.
Yeah.
And some of those may be avoidable. I don't know because I'm not there, but a lot of them, what gripes me, and this is just my own opinion, is that a lot of these suicides, assaults and everything, it's not because the deputies aren't doing their job. or the staff aren't doing their job. It's because the inmate brings the problems with them to the jail. And I like to ask these activists and their families, what were they doing before this person was brought into custody? Where was your activism at that time? But they wait until they get into custody, get a bigger audience with the media. The sheriff's department has a deep pocket, so they know they're going to get some money. And I hate to sound insensitive or anything, but they need help before they get arrested. And that's where these activists and the family members are responsible for these people. And sometimes these people, and I've dealt with them many times, where the inmate is pretty much unknown to their own family until something like that happens. Then all of a sudden they're, a big shot, and they are a victim of the system. But our sheriff, Kelly Martinez, has taken these problems seriously, and she has done a good job, a very good job of making the department better. And she's also dealing with staff shortage. Staff shortages in all departments heavily.
Hey, Dave, I don't mean to interrupt you, but we're past our 1 hour mark. But hey, man, listen, we had a wonderful time listening to your stories. Thank you for your outstanding service. With that said, Chalo, any last words for David?
No, I just want to say thank you very much. And one of the things, you hit the nail right on the head when you said that, where's the family of these people when they're actually out in the streets and they're living in the streets and they're using drugs and they're getting in trouble? They're nowhere to be found. But once they're in custody and something happens to them, they're out there claiming that they're the best kid. And then they start breaking out the photos when the kids were 10, 11 years old, going to Bible study or in church or whatever, and yet they forgot those 7 years in between when they're out there, killing people and doing all the other stuff. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. They always blame the department, never personal responsibility.
Benny, any last words for David?
Just thank you, David. Thanks for coming on, dude. And thank you for those 33 years of service, man.
You're welcome. Thank you for the invite.
Big Sean, last
Ditto.
shout
Ditto. Thank you. Thank you for all the time you did in county jail. I wouldn't want to do it.
He did his time already, man.
He did his time.
He's got a number.
Hey, David, once again, man, thank you very much. And thank you for being on our show. And we'll see you. I know you're going to come back because I wrote a bunch of additional questions that will get you next time. Have a good one, Dave.
Not too much. Thank you guys very much. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, man.
Man, very interesting, huh? I mean, 33 years of experience, man, being locked up with those guys.
Great perspective from somebody that's actually been there and actually sat with these people and babysat all these people.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, he's got a C number.
33 years. Be a C number. Yeah. Hey, Benny, tell us about next week's guest.
Well, we have Richard Valdemar. He's a retired Los Angeles sheriff's detective. Sergeant. He was Richards. we all know him. He's an icon for LA Sheriff. He was one of the original Operation Safe Streets deputies. LA Sheriff has OSS. LAPD has crashed. They both work street gangs. So he was one of the original guys. I think there were 6 that started with, and he was one of the 6. That's one of the most notorious and controversial cases in LA and California in the 80s. I'm talking about the McMartin preschool daycare sexual abuse case. Members of the McMartin family who operated a preschool in Manhattan Beach were charged with hundreds of sexual abuse of children that were under their care. The whole case lasted 7 years. The case was one of the most expensive criminal trials in American history. It's going to be a fascinating interview with him, man. Not only that, we all know that Richard he's a Vietnam War veteran. And man, David knows, he was in the trenches, man. He saw a lot, did a lot, which impacted his life tremendously.
Yeah, he's a true war hero. Not only a war hero, but he's a true law enforcement icon, hero, and a legend. Yes. With that said, Chalo, tell us the last words.
Hey, man, like I've always say, integrity means everything. And like I shared at the beginning of the show, we have a guy that's retiring because of his integrity. He's not going to put his integrity in question, and so integrity means everything. Doing the right thing, whether it's going to cost you your dream, and just do the right thing all the time, man.
Betty.
Well, to those brave men and women who put their lives on the line to protect our communities, just remember, don't tarnish the badge, man. But don't hesitate. Remember that hesitation kills. remember the deadly errors of so many of us. Stay in the fight and survive, man, and head on a swivel, just like Sean says.
Amen. Big Sean.
Operational awareness. Look what's going on around you, especially in these times that we're going on today. And just be safe.
And with that said, like I always say, live a purpose-driven life. Live every day like it's your last day here on earth. You don't need a badge. You don't need a uniform to continue saving lives. We're all sheepdogs. With that said, we'll see you not next Tuesday. We're going to change just that week, the show, to next Thursday, which is, I believe, the 26th. We'll see you on the 26th.